I'm here in Aztec, New Mexico, catching up on some reading in Frank Scully's 1950 book, Behind the Flying Saucers. Here in Aztec, they hold an annual UFO symposium, and it's been held since 1997 in late March as a benefit for the Aztec Public Library. Incidentally, 1997 is the 50th anniversary of the supposed crash of an alien spacecraft in Roswell, New Mexico. Now, this Aztec UFO Symposium is a two-day event, and in the past they've had guest speakers such as Stanton Friedman, Ted Phillips, Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr., Scott Ramsey, Travis Walton, Linda Moulton Howe, Carl Flock, Jim Mars, and the band UFOetry. You may wonder what all this excitement is about UFOs in Aztec, New Mexico, in the far northwestern part of the state. Well, Francis Joseph Xavier Scully was a writer for Daily Variety magazine in the late 1940s. It was more or less an entertainment magazine of the day, and he'd had a hard life. He lost a leg to shrapnel in World War I, he'd lost a lung to tuberculosis, and also suffered osteomyelitis. But he wound up meeting a prospector named Silas Newton, who in turn introduced him to a geophysicist and supposed expert in magnetic research in 1949 named Leo Gebauer. Gebauer claimed to have been in on a retrieval of a flying saucer in Aztec, and claimed that the reason that the saucer had fallen was that it was knocked out of the sky by magneto trouble caused by radar stations here in New Mexico. Scully was looking for a story, and in 72 days he wrote Behind the Flying Saucers, one of the first flying saucer books. Depending on which version of the story you believe, either he interviewed 8 scientists and combined them into one character in the book called Dr. G, or the other version is that Leo Gebauer himself was Dr. G. The book was a bestseller, selling over 60,000 copies. According to the story, about 5 a.m. on March 28, 1948, out here on Hart Canyon Road, about 12 miles out of Aztec, New Mexico, some oil field workers thought that they saw an oil fire. They came out here on the mesa to investigate, and when they got here, they found a flying saucer. Now, according to Scully, these flying saucers had been developed a long time before this one crashed out here in Hart Canyon. The Venusians thought that it was going to be a long trip here to Earth from Venus, and so they had sleeping quarters built into their spaceship. When they found out that it was a much shorter trip, though, the toilets that they had built in, they decided to dispense with those. Now, you may wonder why Venusians would bother to come 26 million miles here to Earth from Venus. Well, it was because they wanted to investigate atomic tests that were going on at the time in the South Pacific. I'm not sure to account, though, for how they crashed 5,300 miles from Bikini Atoll if they could navigate all their way here from Venus. The military arrived that afternoon, and they secured the area in a 2-mile radius around this supposed crash site. To recover the flying saucer, they built this secret road that comes up here to this concrete slab. They built this as a footing for a large crane to pick up the flying saucer, which was about 200 yards that way. This is the supposed crash site. And when the military got out here and investigated this craft, they found that it was 99.99 feet wide. Not 100 feet, 99.99. And there was no bolts or rivets of any kind in it. But the Venusians did have portholes in it so they could see into outer space when they were traveling here. One of these portholes was cracked, so the military broke the rest of it out, reached inside, and luckily found a knob. And they turned that knob and it opened a secret door that let them into the spacecraft. Inside the craft, they found 14 to 16 humanoid bodies that were charred to a dark brown. They were 36 to 42 inches tall, and there's two versions of what they physically looked like. Either they looked exactly like humans, only they had perfect teeth, or they had no blood, but instead had a fluid inside of them that smelled like ozone, and they were gray, had no digestive tracts, but they still had perfect teeth. Now this flying saucer was made of metal that couldn't be cut with a 10,000 degree cutting torch. And it had no rivets, no seams in it, but still the military somehow managed to cut an 18-foot control cabin out of it. And they looked inside of this control cabin, and there were push buttons and levers and that sort of thing, and it was written in some kind of hieroglyphics. They also found a control manual, basically in a book form, coated with plastic that was also written in these hieroglyphics. The investigators disassembled the craft and loaded it onto trucks covered with tarpaulins labeled explosives. They then moved it to Los Alamos, New Mexico, where those parts stayed for a year before being moved to Wright Field in Ohio. At that point, the story on the saucer itself ends. It wasn't the end, though, of what Silas Newton and Dr. G had to tell Frank Scully. By 1952, Silas Newton had turned over what he considered saucer debris to be analyzed. And sure enough, they found out that it was an alloy that kitchen utensils were made out of at the time. Soon, the Denver District Court indicted Silas Newton and Leo Gebauer for fraud. Silas Newton and Leo Gebauer were selling doodlebugs, which is basically dowsing equipment for use in mining. They claimed theirs, though, utilized alien technology. And they were charging exorbitant fees for this piece of equipment. It wound up going to court, though, and it was revealed that they were selling a piece of war surplus material that cost them $4. They were found guilty, and their legal troubles dogged them for the rest of their lives. Newton died in 1972, Gebauer died in 1982. And for the rest of their lives, they were dodging lawsuits related to real estate and mining fraud. That, though, isn't the end of the story. Although there may be some issues with the original copy, on March 18, 1950, the Farmington paper ran a headline, "Huge Saucer Armada Jolts Farmington." And for about 3 days, between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., about half the population of Farmington claimed to have seen an armada of flying saucers. There's about 500 flying saucers flying at about 1,000 miles an hour east at 20,000 feet. These were led by a red object, and the rest of them were white and in formation. Some people think that this could have been space people saluting their fallen comrades. A lot of people think that this armada was actually cotton wood seeds being blown through the air. I think that that's a little bit far-fetched for people who would be used to seeing cottonwood seeds blown in the air. The Aztec UFO Conference is a fun event, and it's a great benefit for the Aztec Public Library. But the question is, was there ever a real UFO crash in Aztec, New Mexico? Researchers like Scott Ramsey claim that this is all true, but every witness that they pull up for it seems to die. And all the information that I've seen seems to come from second-hand witnesses. Ramsey has, though, found information about radar installations in the area, including up in Elvado, New Mexico, which is fairly near. But could a spaceship that made it all the way here from Venus be knocked out of the air with World War II radar technology? Maybe. So, with the Aztec UFO crash, essentially, we're left with some material that a guy handed over that proved to be from kitchen utensils. We're left with this mesa behind us where a UFO apparently either floated or crashed to the ground. It was 99.99 feet in diameter, and a crane 200 yards away picked it up and hauled it away for the military. So we have some new books, some new videos, but the bottom line is we're left with Frank Scully's 1950s book, Behind the Flying Saucers. Is it a hoax? Is it a real story? You be the judge. Until next time.